He once said I owed my career to him. Today, he signed the papers that made him my employee. But let me start at the beginning, 3 years ago, when I still believed hard work and talent were enough to succeed in Chicago's cutthroat financial world. I was 31 and unstoppable. At least, that's what everyone told me. Sloan Archer, the brilliant strategist who'd pulled off the Meridian merger. The woman who'd saved 3 failing portfolios in 1 quarter. The next director of Vail Capital's investment division. My mentor, Thomas Vail, had championed me for years. He'd taken me under his wing when I was fresh out of graduate school, taught me everything about high-stakes finance, and promised me the world. "You're going places, Sloan," he'd say during our strategy meetings. "I see myself in you. That hunger. That brilliance." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me reason to doubt his intentions. When he invited me to dinner at the exclusive Belmont Club to celebrate my upcoming promotion, I thought it was just another professional milestone. I wore my best suit. Brought my portfolio. Expected to discuss my new role as director. I was so naive. The restaurant was elegant, all dark wood and crystal chandeliers. Thomas had reserved a private room. At the time, I thought nothing of it. We'd had plenty of confidential business discussions before. He ordered expensive wine, made a toast to my success, and smiled that charming smile that had won over countless clients. "You've earned this promotion, Sloan," he said, refilling my glass. "But I want to make sure we understand each other moving forward." I nodded, expecting talk about quarterly targets or team restructuring. Instead, he leaned closer. His hand covered mine on the table. Our relationship could be so much more than professional. I've always been attracted to ambitious women. And I take care of people who take care of me. The words hung in the air between us. I pulled my hand back slowly, my mind racing to process what was happening. "Thomas, I'm not sure what you're suggesting, but I'm suggesting we could have an arrangement. One that benefits us both." His voice was casual, like he was proposing a business deal. "You're a smart woman. You understand how the world works. Success requires certain sacrifices. Certain alliances." My stomach turned. This man I'd respected for 5 years was propositioning me. Worse, he was implying my promotion depended on my response. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "I earned that promotion through my work. Not through whatever you're suggesting." Thomas's expression shifted. The warmth disappeared, replaced by something cold and calculating. "Sit down, Sloan. Don't make this dramatic. I'm leaving." I grabbed my portfolio, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. "If you walk out that door," he said quietly, "you'll regret it. I made you, Sloan. I can unmake you just as easily." I should have reported him to HR immediately. Should have documented everything. But I was shocked, humiliated, and furious. I wanted distance from him. Wanted to pretend the conversation never happened. So I left without another word, drove home in a daze, and spent the night alternating between rage and disbelief. Monday morning, I arrived at work expecting some kind of confrontation. Instead, Thomas acted like nothing had happened. He smiled at me in the hallway. Said good morning in our team meeting. The normalcy was somehow worse than anger would have been. It felt like a threat disguised as civility. Like he was waiting to see if I'd stay silent. I did. And that silence became my biggest mistake. The demotion came 2 weeks later. I was called into HR on a Friday afternoon. Thomas sat beside the HR director, his expression professionally concerned. "We're restructuring the investment division," the director explained. "Your role is being reassigned. We think you'd be better suited as a senior analyst." Senior analyst. A position 3 levels below where I'd been. I stared at Thomas, waiting for him to defend me, to explain this was a mistake. Instead, he nodded sympathetically. Sometimes we need to take a step back to move forward, Sloane. I'm sure you understand. The words were carefully chosen. Plausible. Corporate. But his eyes told the truth. This was punishment. I don't understand, I said, my voice steady despite the panic rising in my chest. My performance reviews are excellent. I closed the Meridian deal. What justifies this demotion? The decision has been made, the HR director said. You'll transition to your new role next Monday. After the meeting, I cornered Thomas in the hallway. This is because I said no. He straightened his tie, his expression maddeningly calm. This is business, Sloane. You'll understand someday. Then he walked away, leaving me standing alone in a corridor I'd once walked with confidence. Now I felt like an intruder in my own career. The whispers started immediately. Colleagues who'd once sought my advice now avoided eye contact. At company meetings, I sat in the back instead of at the strategy table. My opinions were dismissed or ignored. Thomas had poisoned my reputation without saying a word against me directly. He simply stopped defending me. And in corporate politics, silence speaks louder than accusation. I tried to rebuild. Worked harder than ever. Stayed late, arrived early, produced flawless analyses. But nothing changed. Thomas controlled the narrative, and his narrative painted me as difficult, unreliable, not quite as brilliant as everyone had thought. 6 months after the demotion, I resigned. Not dramatically. Not with accusations or threats. I simply packed my desk on a Tuesday morning and left my resignation letter on Thomas's desk. It contained 2 sentences. I'm leaving Vale Capital effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunities you've provided. Professional. Dignified. And utterly hollow. I drove home feeling like I'd just buried a version of myself. The ambitious woman who'd believed merit mattered. Who'd trusted her mentor. Who'd thought she could win by playing fair. That woman died in Thomas's office. Someone harder took her place. The job market was brutal. Every interview seemed promising until reference checks. Then nothing. Radio silence. I knew Thomas was behind it. His influence stretched across Chicago's financial sector. A subtle word here, a vague concern there, and suddenly I was unhireable. I burned through my savings in 3 months. Had to give up my downtown apartment, move to a cheaper place in Milwaukee. The city where I'd once commanded boardrooms now felt like a graveyard of failed dreams. I stopped going to industry events. Deleted my professional social media. Became invisible. At my lowest point, I took freelance consulting jobs for small businesses. Nothing glamorous. A family restaurant needing budget restructuring. A local bookstore analyzing inventory costs. Work that would have embarrassed my younger self. But it kept me afloat. More importantly, it taught me something Thomas never had. Real business wasn't about power plays and ego. It was about solving problems for people who needed help. One client, a small manufacturing company, had accounting irregularities that looked familiar. Too familiar. I recognized the pattern. Creative bookkeeping. Inflated projections. The same tactics I'd seen Thomas use at Vale Capital. Tactics I'd once rationalized as aggressive but legal. Now I saw them clearly. Corruption dressed in expensive suits. I met Maya Torres at a small business finance workshop. She was a corporate lawyer turned ethical investing advocate, sharp-minded and uncompromising. During a coffee break, she mentioned leaving a prestigious firm after exposing partner misconduct. They blacklisted me, she said. Best thing that ever happened. I told her my story. Not the sanitized version I'd practiced for interviews. The real one. Thomas's proposition. The demotion. The systematic destruction of my reputation. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. "You could sue," she said finally. "With what evidence? A private dinner conversation? He's too smart to leave a trail." Maya stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Then build something better than revenge. Build something that makes him irrelevant." The idea sparked something in me. Not rage. Something cleaner. Purpose. That night, we met at a diner in Milwaukee. Maya spread papers across our booth while I sketched financial models on napkins. By midnight, we'd outlined Archer Equity, a boutique investment firm focused on transparent, sustainable finance. Everything Vail Capital wasn't. "You'll need capital," Maya warned. 3 years minimum before you're viable." "I know." I stared at our napkin blueprint. "But I'm good at playing the long game now." I enrolled in an MBA program, taking night classes while consulting during the day. My schedule was punishing. Wake at 5, work until 3, class from 6 to 10, study until midnight. But exhaustion felt better than helplessness. Every lecture on corporate governance, every case study on ethical leadership, every exam I aced was a brick in the foundation I was building. Thomas's face haunted my late-night study sessions. His voice echoed in my memory. "I made you. I can unmake you." Wrong, I'd think, highlighting another passage in my textbook. "You showed me what I was capable of becoming without you." That realization was liberating and terrifying. Because I was no longer the woman who'd believed success required someone else's permission. My professors noticed my intensity. One pulled me aside after class. "You're working like someone with something to prove." "I do," I said simply. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Academia was full of people who'd been underestimated, who'd clawed their way back from professional death. I was just one more name in that invisible army. But I wouldn't stay invisible forever. My first client as Archer Equity's founder was a struggling green tech startup called SolarGen. They developed innovative solar panel technology but were drowning in debt from poor financial planning. Their previous investors had abandoned them. They were 3 months from bankruptcy. I restructured their entire financial model, cut unnecessary overhead, renegotiated supplier contracts, found grants they'd missed. Within 6 months, SolarGen was profitable. Within a year, they'd expanded to 3 new markets. They credited Archer Equity with saving their company. Word spread quietly through the sustainable business community. Other startups reached out. Companies tired of traditional venture capital's cutthroat tactics. Entrepreneurs who wanted growth without sacrificing ethics. I built my client list one careful relationship at a time. No flashy marketing. No aggressive networking. Just results. Maya handled the legal framework while I managed strategy. We hired carefully. Every employee had a story similar to ours. People who'd been discarded by bigger firms. Who'd refused to compromise their integrity. Who understood that business could be profitable without being predatory. We became a haven for the professionally wounded. And we were hungry. 2 years into building Archer Equity, I saw the article. Vail Capital Post's record profits screamed the headline. Thomas's face smiled from the photo, accepting some industry award. The article praised his innovative investment strategies and commitment to excellence. I read every word, my coffee growing cold. Part of me felt the old rage. The unfairness of his success while I'd scraped by. But mostly I felt something colder. Anticipation. Because I recognized the numbers in the article. The portfolios he was bragging about, they were unsustainable. Built on the same risky tactics that looked brilliant during market highs but collapsed during corrections. Thomas was overextended, over-leveraged, one bad quarter away from serious trouble, and the market was showing warning signs. I pulled up Vail Capital's public filings, studied their positions, and saw the cracks forming. He'd gotten greedy, reckless. The same arrogance that made him think he could proposition me now made him think he was invincible in the market. "He's going to crash," I told Maya, showing her the analysis. She studied the numbers, her expression thoughtful. "Revenge isn't a business plan, Sloan." "This isn't revenge," I replied. "This is patience. And opportunity." Maya's warning stayed with me. Was I building Archer Equity to succeed on our own merit? Or was I just waiting for Thomas to fail? The distinction mattered. Because revenge was hollow. It consumed the person seeking it. But justice? Justice was different. Justice meant creating something better while the corrupt collapsed under their own weight. I decided to focus on growth, not Thomas's downfall. We expanded carefully, took on bigger clients, hired more staff. Within another year, Archer Equity managed $50 million in assets. Small compared to Vail Capital's billions. But we were profitable, ethical, and growing steadily. Our reputation for integrity began attracting attention from exactly the type of investors Thomas had alienated. Wealthy clients tired of aggressive tactics. Foundations looking for socially responsible investment. Companies wanting sustainable growth. They came to us because we offered something Vail Capital couldn't. Honesty. No hidden fees. No risky gambles. No corporate games. Just solid financial strategy focused on long-term success. Maya and I worked side by side, building not just a company but a community. Our team felt like family. The found family I'd needed after losing faith in mentorship. Every success we celebrated together. Every challenge we faced as a unit. This was what business should be. And slowly, inevitably, we were becoming significant players in Chicago's financial landscape. Former Vail Capital employees started reaching out. Quiet messages. Careful phone calls. They'd heard about Archer Equity's culture. Our ethics. Our success. They wanted out of Thomas's firm but feared the same blacklisting I'd experienced. I interviewed each one carefully. Not just for skills, though they were all talented. I wanted to understand why they were leaving. What they'd witnessed. What they couldn't stomach anymore. Their stories painted a picture of a company rotting from the inside. Aggressive sales tactics. Misrepresented returns. Pressure to cut corners. Everything I'd suspected was true. Why now? I asked one former senior analyst. Why leave after so many years? Because I finally have somewhere to go, he replied. You proved it's possible to succeed without selling your soul. That matters. I hired him and 4 others over the next 6 months. Each brought institutional knowledge of Vail Capital's weaknesses. Not corporate espionage. Just understanding. They knew which clients were unhappy, which portfolios were troubled, which practices were legally questionable. Information that flowed naturally in conversation. Information that helped me understand exactly how vulnerable Thomas's empire had become. The market correction hit in early autumn. Nothing catastrophic. Just a modest downtown that separated strong portfolios from weak ones. Vail Capital's stock dropped 12% in 1 week. Then another 8% the following week. Thomas issued confident statements about market recovery. But I could read between the lines. He was bleeding money. The aggressive positions he'd bragged about were collapsing. Clients were withdrawing funds. And he couldn't cover the losses without liquidating assets at a loss. The same arrogance that made him untouchable for years was now his weakness. He'd believed his own mythology. Thought he was too smart to fail. I didn't celebrate his troubles. Instead, I studied them. Learned from his mistakes. Made sure Archer Equity's portfolios were conservative enough to weather the correction. Our clients barely noticed the market turbulence. That stability attracted more business. Companies that had ignored us suddenly wanted meetings. We were becoming the alternative. The smart choice. The firm that actually protected its clients. Meanwhile, Vale Capital's troubles deepened. Quietly, methodically, I began acquiring small companies linked to his investment portfolio. Nothing dramatic. Just strategic purchases at good prices from desperate sellers. Building a network of businesses that would matter later. Setting pieces on a chessboard Thomas didn't even know we were playing on. The envelope arrived at my office without a return address. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. "You deserve to see this." No signature. I plugged the drive into my computer carefully, half expecting malware. Instead, I found financial documents. Internal Vale Capital reports showing years of inflated returns. Falsified projections. Client statements that didn't match actual positions. Someone inside Thomas's firm was blowing the whistle. Anonymously. Carefully. Giving me evidence of systematic fraud. I called Maya immediately. "We need to handle this carefully," she said, reviewing the documents. "If we expose this wrong, it implicates us. If we do it right, it's justice." We spent weeks verifying everything. Cross-referencing public filings with the leaked documents. Building an airtight case. The evidence was damning. Thomas had been lying to clients for years. Not just optimistic projections. Actual fraud. Claiming returns he hadn't delivered. Hiding losses. Operating what amounted to a smaller-scale Ponzi scheme. We could go to regulators, Maya suggested. I shook my head. Not yet. First, we save his company. Maya stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Trust me," I said. "The best revenge is becoming his savior. Then his judge." Through an intermediary holding company, I structured a merger offer. Vale Capital was hemorrhaging money. Their board was panicking. My offer looked like salvation. A larger, stable firm absorbing their troubled assets. Keeping the Vale Capital name. Protecting jobs. The board would stay on initially. Thomas would retain a leadership position during the transition. It was brilliant corporate camouflage. The holding company's structure hid Archer Equity's involvement. Thomas's board saw only the financial terms. A lifeline when they were drowning. They accepted within a week. Thomas himself championed the deal, calling it a strategic partnership that positions Vale Capital for future growth. I read his statement and smiled. He had no idea he'd just signed his company over to the woman he tried to destroy. The merger documents were complex enough that my name appeared nowhere obvious. Just buried in subsidiary ownership structures. Legal. Transparent if anyone looked closely. But Thomas was too arrogant to look closely. He trusted that he was still in control. The closing was scheduled for November 15th. In exactly 6 weeks, Thomas Vale would work for me. And he didn't know it yet. The negotiation meeting took place in a neutral conference room downtown. Thomas's legal team on one side. The holding company's representatives on the other. I attended as a strategic consultant, my name on the roster but my role deliberately vague. Thomas was charming, confident, working the room like he always did. shaking hands, making jokes, acting like this merger was his idea, his victory. I sat at the far end of the table, taking notes, watching him perform. He glanced at me once, recognition flickering across his face. Then confusion. What was Sloan Archer doing in this room? But he was too focused on the deal to ask questions. Too convinced of his own brilliance to see the trap closing around him. His lawyer reviewed terms. Thomas signed page after page, his signature bold and assured. I signed as a proxy representative, my role carefully worded to obscure my actual authority. When the last signature was complete, Thomas stood and smiled. Gentlemen, to a successful partnership. Everyone shook hands. Thomas left the room already planning his next power play. He thought he'd maneuvered his way out of disaster. Kept his position. Saved his company. He had no idea he'd just become my employee. The first joint board meeting was scheduled 3 weeks after closing. Vale Capital's board arrived expecting routine transition planning. Thomas walked in last, as always, commanding attention. He froze when he saw me sitting at the head of the table. "What is she doing here?" he asked, looking at his board members for explanation. I stood, extending my hand professionally. "Hello, Thomas. Welcome to Archer Equity." His face drained of color. "I don't understand." Maya, sitting beside me, opened a folder. "The holding company that acquired Vale Capital is wholly owned by Archer Equity, which makes Ms. Archer your CEO. Effective immediately." She slid the organizational charts across the table. Thomas stared at the documents, his hands trembling slightly. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Some had known. Others were learning now. One woman, whom Thomas had once overlooked for promotion, smiled slightly. "Ms. Archer, please continue." Thomas found his voice. "This is insane. You can't just take over my company." "I didn't take it," I replied calmly. "You sold it. The terms were clear. You signed the documents yourself." I gestured to his chair. "Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss about Vale Capital's future." Thomas tried every tactic over the following weeks. Charm first. "Sloan, we can work together. You and I always made a great team." I responded with professional courtesy and nothing more. Then anger. "You're doing this because I hurt your feelings 3 years ago? This is childish." I never took the bait. Never engaged emotionally. Just documented every inappropriate comment. Every attempt to undermine my authority. Every time he spoke over female colleagues in meetings. He was building his own case without realizing it. Meanwhile, I'd placed strategic allies on the new joint board. 3 women Thomas had once pushed out or passed over. They owed him nothing and saw clearly what he was. They voted with me on every key decision. Restructuring. Ethics reviews. Financial audits. Thomas's power eroded meeting by meeting. "You're enjoying this," he accused me after one particularly brutal board session where his objections were voted down 4-1. I looked at him calmly. "I'm doing my job. The same job you said I wasn't capable of handling." Funny how competence looks like revenge when you're used to getting your way. The ethics audit began quietly. A standard review of all merged company practices. I assigned our most thorough compliance officer to lead it. Within 2 weeks, she'd found discrepancies. Client statements that didn't match actual account values. Returns reported to clients that were higher than returns reported to regulators. Small differences. Easy to explain away individually. But together, they formed a pattern. Thomas was called to explain. He blamed computer errors. Outdated reporting systems. overzealous junior analysts. He had an excuse for everything. Plausible excuses that might have worked if we hadn't already had the leaked documents proving intent. I let him keep talking. Let him dig deeper. Every explanation was recorded. Every excuse documented. When he was finished, I simply said, "Thank you for clarifying your position. We'll continue the investigation." His eyes narrowed. "You're trying to frame me." "I'm trying to understand what happened at Vale Capital under your leadership. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about." The words were his own, thrown back at him from a conversation 3 years ago when he'd questioned my expense reports. The irony wasn't lost on him. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. The leak to the press wasn't planned. At least, not by me. Someone on the audit team must have shared preliminary findings with a journalist contact. The headline appeared on a Wednesday morning. Vale Capital under investigation for client fraud. The article was vague. Cited anonymous sources. Mentioned ongoing audits. But it was enough to trigger panic. Client phones started ringing. Investors demanded explanations. The stock price of our publicly traded holdings dropped 4% in one day. Thomas called an emergency press conference. Denied everything. Called the allegations baseless attacks by jealous competitors. Promised full transparency. "I've built this company on integrity," he declared, looking directly into cameras. "These accusations are designed to damage our reputation. They're false. And I'll prove it." I watched the press conference from my office. Maya sat beside me. "He's lying under public scrutiny now," she said. "That's going to make this worse for him." "I know." I pulled up the leaked documents on my computer. Every false statement Thomas had just made to the press. Every denial that contradicted his own internal memos. Let's give the investigators everything they need. Not through the press. Through proper channels. Clean. Legal. Undeniable. The board vote was scheduled for the following Thursday. Emergency session to address the growing scandal. Thomas prepared like he was going to war. Hired expensive lawyers. Crafted his defense. Lined up character witnesses. He walked into that boardroom thinking he could talk his way out of anything. He always had before. I let him speak first. He was eloquent, passionate, defending his reputation with practiced charm. "I've given 18 years to this company. Built it from nothing. Yes, mistakes were made. But they were honest mistakes. System errors. Never intentional fraud. I'm asking this board to stand by me as I've stood by all of you." When he finished, the room was silent. Then I opened my folder. "Thomas, you said mistakes were never intentional. Can you explain this email?" I read aloud. His own words, instructing an analyst to report higher returns to a specific client. "And this one?" Another email. More damning evidence. "And this one?" His face changed with each revelation. Confusion. Then anger. Then fear. These were internal communications he thought were protected. Deleted. Gone. But Maya had taught me that nothing digital ever truly disappears. We'd recovered everything through the merger's IT integration. All legally obtained. All admissible. All destroying his defense word by word. The vote was unanimous. Thomas Vale was terminated for cause. Effective immediately. No severance package. No stock options. No golden parachute. Just a letter citing gross misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The same generic corporate language that had been used to demote me 3 years ago. Security escorted him out. I watched from my office window as he walked across the parking lot carrying a small box. His shoulders slumped. His confident stride gone. For a moment, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction. Not joy. Just a strange sadness for what he could have been if he hadn't confused power with control. Maya found me at the window. You won. No, I said quietly. I just survived. Because that's what this was. Not victory. Just the end of a battle I never wanted to fight. Thomas had forced this confrontation when he chose corruption over mentorship. When he tried to own me instead of elevate me. His downfall wasn't my revenge. It was his own choices catching up to him. I turned from the window. Let's focus on rebuilding. Making sure Vale Capital's clients are protected. That's what matters now. Maya nodded, understanding. We weren't celebrating. We were working. Because real power wasn't destroying your enemies. It was building something good enough that their destruction became irrelevant. The press interview request came from a national finance magazine. They wanted the story behind the merger. The scandal. The dramatic boardroom confrontation. I almost declined. Then Maya convinced me. Control your narrative or someone else will. The interview was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon. The journalist was professional but probing. Some say you orchestrated this entire situation as revenge against Thomas Vale. Is that true? I chose my words carefully. Thomas was my mentor for 5 years. He taught me everything about finance. I'll always be grateful for that early guidance. But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of what matters. Not profit. Not power. But the people we're supposed to serve. Our clients. Our employees. Our communities. So this wasn't personal? Business is always personal. But my goal wasn't destroying Thomas. It was building something better. Archer Equity succeeds because we're ethical, not despite it. That's the story I want told. The article published 2 weeks later. Midway through, it revealed something I hadn't known. Thomas had tried to sell them a tell-all interview first, blaming me for his downfall, claiming I'd sabotaged him out of bitterness. The journalist had fact-checked his claims and found them false. So they'd come to me instead. I established the Archer Initiative 6 months after Thomas's termination. A scholarship fund for women entering finance and law. Full tuition coverage. Mentorship programs. Internship placements. Everything I'd wished I'd had when starting out. Maya helped me launch it at a gala fundraiser. Corporate sponsors lined up. Our first year, we funded 20 scholarships. Applications came from across the country. Young women who'd faced discrimination. Who'd been told they weren't smart enough, aggressive enough, male enough to succeed in finance. We proved them wrong 20 times over. You turned revenge into reform, Maya told me during the gala. I shook my head. I turned pain into purpose. There's a difference. Because that's what healing looked like. Not forgetting what Thomas did. Not pretending the betrayal didn't matter. But transforming that experience into something that helped others. Making sure the next generation of women didn't have to choose between integrity and advancement. That was legacy. That mattered. Standing on that gala stage, announcing our scholarship recipients, I finally felt the weight lift. Not the anger. Not the memory. Just the heaviness of carrying unfinished business. Thomas was my past. These young women were the future. And I was choosing which one mattered more. I visited the old Vale Capital office one final time. The building had been sold, rebranded, transformed into the new Archer Equity headquarters. My office now occupied the corner space where Thomas used to sit. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. The same view he'd had. But somehow, it looked different now. I placed a small brass key on the empty desk. The one Thomas had taken from me when I was demoted. When security had escorted me out. I'd found it in his desk drawer during the merger transition. Kept it all these months. Now I was leaving it here. Not as a trophy. As a reminder of where I'd been. What I'd survived. Who I'd become. You taught me everything about power, I whispered to the empty room. To the ghost of the mentor I'd lost. Just not how to keep it. Because power built on fear always crumbled eventually. Power earned through integrity lasted. Thomas had shown me what not to become. And in doing so, he'd helped create something stronger than he'd ever built. I turned from the desk and walked out. Not looking back. Not dwelling. Just moving forward. The Chicago skyline stretched before me through the windows. Full of possibility. Full of companies that needed honest financial guidance. Full of young professionals who deserved ethical mentors. That was my work now. Not revenge. Not justice. Just building something worth building. And finally, after 3 years of fighting, that felt like enough. That felt like freedom.